In this video, I'm going to show you how you can write SQL queries against all sorts of different data sources, local tabular data, Snowflake, Postgres, JSON over HTTP, all within Obsidian. Yep, that Obsidian, the note-taking application. We're going to use the Execute Code Obsidian plugin within Python together with GlareDB in order to do this. So first, I'm going to show you a bunch of examples just so you can get a sense of what's possible, why you might want to do this, what's useful. I'll dive into the background and explain the different components that we used here, so Obsidian, Execute Code plugin, and GlareDB. Then I'll walk you through the installation and setup. So it's not too challenging, but you want to install the plugin and set up your Python environment accordingly. And then finally, as you may imagine, querying data from within Obsidian is not the prescribed use case. And so you're probably going to encounter some friction, and I'll guide you through some of the things that have worked for me to make life better. So things like CSS snippets for the SQL output and different interesting ways of managing the environment and credentials. Okay, so first things first, let's dive into some examples so you can see how and why someone might want to do this, what's possible, what you can do here. So we're using the Execute Code plugin. I'll talk a bit more about that later, but it basically lets you run arbitrary code within code blocks in Obsidian Markdown files. It lets you run code in a whole bunch of different languages. In this case, we're using Python. And we're also going to be using GlareDB, which, if you're not familiar, lets you write queries against a whole bunch of different data source backends. GlareDB has both an in-memory database component, also a cloud component, and with which you can use hybrid execution. I'll show you that a bit later. But just to start, we're using an in-memory GlareDB database, connecting to it, and then querying a local Parquet file that we have over here, testfile.parquet. Then we're taking the output, converting it to pandas, and outputting that as a markdown table. And so here you can see we have like pretty nice big wide table. We can peruse it, which is great. Okay, so that's the first one. Then we're going to query a Postgres table using read Postgres. So this Postgres connection it's just a local connection at this point, but you can run this against any Postgres connection that you have. Different table, writing it, same process. You write the query, convert to pandas, convert to markdown, print it out. This example is going to be using the Open Pinball database, which is just making an HTTP request for some JSON data. This is going to take a moment because this is over the connection. And here we have it. This is a repository of a whole bunch of different pinball machines. So it's just a fun data source. Okay, what's next? Now we're going to query an existing Snowflake external database with GlareDB Cloud. So let me run this. This is also going to take a minute. So a couple things are different here. We're using a GlareDB Cloud connection. So before we were using GlareDB in-memory database. So in this cloud connection, I have already set up Snowflake external database, which lets you just treat Snowflake tables as if they're tables in your database. I could also do this with the read Snowflake function, but just wanted to show you another possibility here. So this is all data, more New York City sales data that came from within Snowflake in Obsidian. It's great. Okay, so now we've taken this Snowflake data, we've saved it as a data frame. We're going to use GlareDB to copy this out to a local CSV file. So let's run this. And you see here, we now have another file here. This is copied file.csv. So we've taken this Snowflake data and saved it as a table. Now, I'm not saying you should use Obsidian for your ETL pipelines, but it's possible. And let's just query the CSV file so we can see. Yeah, here we have it. It's the same data, but now we're pulling from the CSV file instead. And finally, let's plot the results within Obsidian. So it's a single month of New York City property sales data, so it's not that interesting. When you plot the results over time, you can see these dips. Those are weekends, and these peaks, which, well, weekdays. Yeah, so there you have it. Next up, I'm going to show you, next up I'll talk a little bit about the background, some of the different components of this, and then we'll move on. Okay, so now that you've seen that, just a bit of background. if you're not familiar with Obsidian, it's this app that we're working in here right now. It's a note-taking app. It's a way of writing and viewing markdown files and doing a whole bunch of different things with them. So it's kind of a cross between a note-taking app and a to-do list app, and it lets you do all sorts of things, all within the frame of writing markdown files and occasionally JavaScript and occasionally other things too. It's really great. Prior to Obsidian, I would try to-do list app after note-taking app after to-do list app after note-taking app. And at this point, I've been using Obsidian for probably 5 years, and it's the first one that really stuck. And the things that really appeal to me about it are it's very, very simple to use, but it's also incredibly extensible. So you can kind of start off really minimally and then slowly add features as you figure out other use cases that you could need. I especially love that I can keep my notes and my drafts and my to-do lists and a whole bunch of other writing all in one place, and it gives you an environment that makes it really possible to navigate all of that. Okay, so people have achieved some really wonderful and wacky things with Obsidian thanks to its robust plugin library. There are so many different interesting integrations, which are way too numerous to name. But querying has been an interesting thing for a while because Obsidian makes it pretty readily possible to query within your Obsidian vault, especially when you use plugins like DataView or tasks. You can query the data in your vault. So you could do things like list all the tasks that you set up there to do today, or you can plot the number of new notes added over a period of time. But I've also wanted to be able to write queries over data sources outside of Obsidian within Obsidian. And so, I mean, I use it for a whole bunch of different projects, and it would be really amazing, for instance, if I could like query a data source and embed the results within a report, or plot the results of a query within a report. And so this is something that I was wondering about for a little while, and then I encountered the Execute Code plugin, which lets you run arbitrary code within Obsidian. And so using that with GlareDB, which GlareDB, if you're not familiar, lets you query a whole bunch of different data sources and join data across a whole bunch of different data sources. GlareDB can be just an embedded in-memory database. Like now I can do what I want to do. I can query just about any data source I could need, all within this Obsidian environment where I'm already doing so much of my work. Okay, so a few notes before we move on. So first, if you're not that familiar with Obsidian or GlareDB for that matter, I don't think anything in here will be too shocking. So please do keep watching, see if this works well for you. But you're going to want to look at other videos, other resources in order to get started. And so I'll drop a couple of links in the description for resources for using both Obsidian and GlareDB. Next. Executing arbitrary code within Obsidian is hacky and probably somewhat dubious from a security perspective. So be sensible, be careful out there with what you're running. Don't run code that you get from strangers, etc. Okay. Third, depending on which data sources you are connecting to, you will likely have some sensitive information like credentials or the results of the data that you're querying. So be really careful not to make anything public that you don't want to make public, especially based on how you back up your Obsidian vault. So you don't want to accidentally commit some credentials to a public GitHub repo. And I will have a few suggested workarounds for ways to safeguard some of that information, but I do encourage you to poke around, see what works for you. And if you have any ideas, please let me know. All right, so next up, let us set up our environment and install the plugin. So 2 main steps. You're going to install the Execute Code plugin, and then you're going to set up your Python environment and point the plugin at the environment. And so to install the plugin, you're going to open up your Obsidian preferences, click on Community Plugins, browse, and then search for Execute Code. And here it is. I've already installed the plugin, as you may be aware, but you could just press the install button to actually get it installed, and then you'll press the enable button to make sure that it works. Okay, then you can close that. The next thing you're going to want to do in this case is set up a virtual environment. so that you can keep all of your dependencies that you're going to want to use when running the Execute Code plugin together. And so in my case, I'm going to make a directory, and navigate inside of it, and then I'm going to make a new virtual environment with venv. So I'll do run python 3-m, and then venv. And then once I have that, I'm going to activate the environment, source venv/bin/activate. And then once you have this environment, you're going to want to install anything that you'll need. And so in this case, we're going to install GlareDB, and then after that, we'll install pandas and matplotlib. Once you have the environment and you've installed the plugin, now you'll open up your preferences, and you should see within your preferences on this left pane, there's going to be the Execute Code dropdown. And you'll see here, there's a place to specify your Python path. And so you're going to want to go all the way to your virtual environment, so where you have that open. And then within that, you're going to have venv/bin/python. So and you see Python 3.11, that's what I'm using here. And you're just going to paste in the path all the way there. So if we navigate here and then do pwd and then just copy this and paste it in. And then after pasting in the working directory, you can add the version of Python that you're using in the virtual environment. So this is Python 3.11. This is the Python binary itself there. Okay, so once we have that, we can actually start using the Execute Code plugin. So just as an example, I'm going to make up a code block. I'm going to put Python here and just print hello world. And you'll see I've done this and it's formatted nicely, but I can't actually run this. And the reason is I'm currently in editing mode. And so if I want to use this Python block, I need to switch into reading mode. So if we switch into reading mode with Command E, now we have this run button. If I run this, then yeah, there it goes. Often I want to use this plugin when I'm in editing mode, not in reading mode. So if I switch back, there's a way of doing that also. Instead of using a Python code block, you're just going to prepend this with run and then dash. And this is going to make it so that you have this run button even in editing mode. So if I run this here, there you have it. One trick with this, you can't edit by clicking in here anywhere. So if you do want to edit this, you need to click either above or below and navigate in, and then you can edit the code block as you wish. Next up, let's talk about some of the different things that you can do to make this whole experience a little bit better. And so first off, let's talk about CSS snippets for SQL output. So by default, when you output long and wide tables, this is not formatted as nicely as this. So let's take a look at what that would look like. So if you open up your preferences and you open up, you click to appearance, you'll see that Obsidian lets you use custom CSS snippets to modify the appearance of your vault. And I have this widen code blocks snippet. I'm going to turn this off just so you can see. And so you can see here we have this is kind of like a more, I don't know, you can sometimes get this with wide tables with standard out. I don't find this to be very readable. And so I find the code snippet to be really handy. And so I'm going to paste the code in the comments or in the description. You'll see that in a moment. But what you do is you open up your Obsidian vault, and you'll see that there is a .obsidian directory within that. And within that .obsidian directory, there's a snippets directory. And you can just create a new CSS file and copy the code right in there. And once you do that and you save, you can open up your preferences again. And again, you click into appearance and then go to CSS snippets. And if you don't see the snippet that you're expecting, then just click the refresh button over here. And then you'll turn it on. close this, and yeah, now we have this. Feel free to modify the snippet as you see fit. If you want to see more, for instance, like more rows at a time, you can make it a little bit taller or a little bit wider or whatever it is. But I found that this is the most useful way of actually seeing the data, being able to explore it. Also play around with the different output formats. I found that the to markdown works pretty well. I've also tried the tabulate package. That works pretty well too. You can format this a little bit more like pSQL. So there are a bunch of options. Please let me know which ones work the best for you. Next up, let's talk about a couple of the useful preferences that come with the Execute Code plugin. So if we again open up our Obsidian preferences, and we click into Execute Code under the community plugins, you'll see a couple of things. There are a few options here. So the things that I find to be particularly useful are run Python blocks in notebook mode. And I think this comes turned on by default. And what this is going to do is it's going to make the logic in your code blocks within a given document, it's going to make it persistent. And that means that you, for instance, only need to call imports one time in the first code block, or in this case, we only set up our GlareDB connection this first time. And then if we scroll down here, we don't need to re-import GlareDB. We don't need to set up our connection again, because all of the variables and everything that you set up with the first code block is going to persist for the later ones. Another really useful setting that you get with the Execute Code plugin is this inject Python code preference. And what this lets you do is inject arbitrary Python code before every single code block. And so this is going to make sure that you don't have to have this code within a given markdown file. It's just going to run automatically. So in my case, one of the things that I'm using this for is to set a working directory for this Obsidian vault. And that's going to let me do things like adding the data file that we selected from before. If you don't set this, then it's just going to set the working directory as /. And so this way you're able to more seamlessly and easily see data that you're pulling in and data that you're copying out. So by doing this, this is how I'm able to select from /data, which is the data within my Obsidian vault. Let's take a look at another use case for this inject Python code setting. So I mentioned this earlier, but we're connecting to all different types of data sources here. So we have a Postgres connection, and we have our GlareDB Cloud connection. Our Snowflake connection in this case is happening through GlareDB Cloud, but you might want to use the read Snowflake function, or maybe you want to read a Parquet file that's stored on S3 or GCS, or maybe you want to write out a Delta table to S3 or GCS. But you're going to need credentials, and you're probably not going to want credentials in your markdown file saved here. And so what I like to do is I use the python.env package with a .env file, and I use that to be able to store my credentials someplace else. So let's take a look. We can use the same environment that we're using, the same virtual environment. I'm going to install python.env. So we have this already, but you should install that if you have not yet. And then if we take a look in the same directory where we keep our virtual environment, I'm just going to create a .env file. And this is going to let me add arbitrary variables that I can load, and I can save my credentials in here safely. So if I do this over here, now if we open up our Obsidian preferences again, and we look at the inject Python code again, we have, from .env import load.env, and then we're going to load this .env file that we've just created. And so we have this here. This is going to run before every single code block. And then we can basically use the os.getEnv to grab the variable that we've just created. And so if I make a new code block down here, we'll do import os, and then we'll set equals hello, and then print variable. And yeah, it's 10, it's what we just set. And so you can basically save all the credentials, anything sensitive in that using that inject Python code snippet by saving all that stuff in your .m file. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to show you is how to run certain GlareDB operations outside of Obsidian that you can then call and use within Obsidian. So for instance, I mentioned this earlier, but we have our Snowflake connection that we've set up in our Obsidian instance already. And so you can do things like that to make things a little bit easier. And so if we go, if you go to console.glaredb.com, you'll see that you can just sign in or sign up if you haven't signed up already. We'll log in. And you'll see here, we have, I've used this before, obviously. We have all the different data sources, all the different tables that we've added within this environment. I've already set up a Snowflake connection here. This is the Snowflake connection that I'm calling on in the Obsidian file. You can also connect a new data source if you want over here. So select any of the ones that you want. For instance, MySQL, you just put in your connections and you put in the name. And so this is the arbitrary name that you can use within GlareDB to reference the data source. And then once you have that, you can easily select from any table within your Snowflake instance or any other external data source that you've added. You can then click on the connect button, and that's going to get you your credentials that you can use within Obsidian or within any other Python environment in order to connect to this specific GlareDB instance. So you get this connection string, you'll want to create a new password. And then this is where we had, so Postgres. Yeah, we had our GlareDB connection string that we have saved in our .m file. And yeah, this is going to get you everything you need. And that's it. I know there's a lot here. This video is definitely longer than I had originally expected, but I was just really delighted to discover the possibilities of querying, displaying data within Obsidian. And I just wanted to share that and share all the different things that I found out here. Please try this out. Let us know in the comments what's worked well for you, what hasn't worked, if there's anything else you've discovered that might make this experience even better. Of course, please do like and subscribe if you're interested in more videos about joining across different data sources or understanding more about different data storage formats. Thanks so much for watching.